Yo, it's your boy Logos, and today I want to react to Thomas Sowell talk about the cold facts about human atrocities around the world. I think it's a very relevant video to talk about, especially over the past month. You had that fake documentary Queen Cleopatra, and I'm not a fan of it, and I'm not a fan of any history being twisted for somebody's benefit, because in my opinion, that's just propaganda, and I don't care if you try to make it some type of virtuous argument or it's a political point or side that I may even support or disagree with. Either way, it's not something that you should be doing. History should be learned from, and you can be inspired by it, but it shouldn't be twisted or changed. Because at that point, like I said earlier, it's nothing more than propaganda. And I have no reason to feel inferior, especially after studying history and understanding it, because we all have good and bad within us. Every person on this planet has an ancestor that was a slaver and a slave. And I shouldn't feel, neither should you, feel inferior or bad about whatever your ancestor did. I think it's more important to just take this moment and this opportunity that we have in the modern age with modern medicine, modern technology, and wealth and money being more distributed ever before in human history, and use the best of it. I think that's a lot better than being upset about something that happened 200, 500, 1,000 years ago and wasting your time. Our ancestors would have probably killed for this opportunity and this comfort that we have, like freaking AC or indoor plumbing. And I don't think this opportunity should just be squandered away, destroying our society, complaining about bullshit we didn't experience. But that's just me. Let's get into this video from Thomas Sowell and see what you got to say.
At one period of history or another, conquest has encompassed virtually all peoples,
Mm-hmm.
either as conquerors or as victims, and the consequences have been wide-ranging as well. Some conquests have been followed by systematic exterminations of the vanquished, as in Rome's conquest of Carthage, nor have such draconian policies been limited to major conquerors of historic dimensions. The massacres of the Tutsi by the Hutu and vice versa in late 20th century Africa and ethnic
I actually just found a documentary on the Tutsi Rwanda genocide. Let me know in the comments down below if you're interested in me doing a reaction to it.
cleansing in the Balkan Wars of the same era clearly show that it does not take a great power to create great human tragedies.
Mm-hmm.
Nor have the much idealized Polynesians been immune. On the Chatham Islands, 500 miles east of New Zealand, centuries of independence came to a brutal end for the Moriori people in December 1835. On November 19th of that year, a ship carrying 500 Maori armed with guns, clubs, and axes arrived, followed on December 5th by a shipload of 400 more Maori. Groups of Maori began to walk through Moriori settlements, announcing that the Moriori were now their slaves, and killing those who objected. A Maori conqueror explained, "We took possession in accordance with our customs, and we caught all the people. Not one escaped. Some ran away from us. These we killed, and others we killed. But what of that? It was in accordance with our customs."
This type of thing is important to talk about and highlight because nowadays they try to make it seem like conquering or colonialization or any of this stuff is just a unique European white people thing. As if Europeans didn't exist, the whole world would be singing Kumbaya or whatever. Like, come on, it's absolutely ridiculous. People fight whoever's around them for territory or possessions or people. Honestly, slaves. She was fighting that whole Women King movie was straight up BS. The same tribe that they try to make the whole heroes of the film were actually slavers. They were cat slaves for their king and help sell them or use them however the king saw fit or saw fit. But they try to twist it up to make it seem like some type of heroic group of warrior women. It's ridiculous. But that's part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this. Because history is just history. Appreciate what you have access to and appreciate the lessons you can learn instead of trying to change it because you're uncomfortable. If you're so uncomfortable you can't handle it, don't watch it or don't read it.
Spontaneous atrocities and deliberate, systematic terror have long marked the path of the conqueror. The Mongol hordes who swept across vast reaches of Central Asia, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East cultivated an image of ruthless barbarities as a
Mm-hmm.
calculated strategy to demoralize future victims. But although the Mongols excelled in such practices, they had no monopoly of them. The Normans did the same. Emperor Basil II of the Byzantine Empire in the 11th century ordered the blinding of 99 of every 100 Bulgarian captives, leaving each 100th man with only one eye to lead the others back home, so as to provide graphic evidence of the emperor's treatment of his enemies.
And the funny thing is, they did the same thing to each other. The Byzantines would pluck the eyes and or cut off the nose of an emperor that was ousted, and that new emperor would make sure that old one that got kicked out couldn't come back and overthrow him the same way that he overthrew him. And part of the way they did that was marking them up and making them so hideously looking, people wouldn't follow them and they'd be ashamed. So they would literally chop off their nose. So it's not just a whole cultural thing or racist thing. People did it to each other and they did it to people they defeated in battle.
It was a common practice in the Ottoman Empire to present the Sultan with pyramids of severed heads of enemy soldiers, usually defenseless prisoners, sometimes numbering in the thousands.
Mm-hmm.
20th century conquests have been equally hideous. The Japanese conquest of the Chinese capital of Nanking in 1937 was followed by an orgy of rapes of thousands of women living there, the use of Chinese soldiers and civilians for bayonet practice, and a general wanton slaughter of civilians. Similar atrocities marked Japanese conquests throughout Southeast Asia during the Second World War. Their allies, the Nazis in Germany, set new lows for brutality and dehumanization.
Honestly, it's hard for me to know at this point because I've been avoiding trying to get into the Japan experimentation and atrocities they've been doing because I know it's some very sick stuff. It's hard to really make a decision on who's more evil compared to Japan and Nazi Germany. Of course, the quick and easy answer would be Nazi Germany because we almost all of us know about the stuff they did, but Japan did horrible experimentation. They dropped plague bombs. They they did some evil stuff that you can't even conceive of to the people that they captured. It could be Asian people. It could be American soldiers, like what he said about practicing their bayonets on them. There was one Japanese, I think, general or high-ranking officer who would practice his Japanese sword. I can't remember what type of sword it was, but he would practice decapitations using U.S. or other soldiers. It was sick. He would ask for fresh prisoners to practice chopping off heads with his nice sword.
Of which the Holocaust against the Jews was only the worst example. England launched an invasion of Scotland in the late 13th century. In the 14th century, the English captured the Scottish town of Berwick, subjecting it to what Winston Churchill called a sack and slaughter which shocked even those barbaric times, for the inhabitants were not simply killed, but tortured to death, and the king himself set fire to their homes. For centuries thereafter, Scottish soldiers fighting the English used the cry, "Remember Berwick," and they skinned alive captured English officers, setting off new rounds of atrocities and counter-atrocities. During those centuries of strife, the contested Borderlands were not simply a region of battles between opposing armies during intermittent warfare. They were a continuously lawless frontier where feuding clans, marauders, vigilantes, and protection racket extortionists flourished. In short, these were not loyal followers of either English or Scottish kings, but freebooters who were said to be Scottish when they will and English at their pleasure. Over the centuries, African nations rose and fell like nations elsewhere around the world, the strong conquering the weak and either subjugating or enslaving those unable to resist. The Zulus, for example, invaded and conquered much of southern Africa in the 19th century, before the British arrived in 1879 to confront them and fight for control of the land. The first battle between them was won by the Zulus, leaving this scene of carnage on the battlefield. 2 British drummer boys were hung up by their chins on butcher's hooks, their stomachs cut open like sheep. Most of the white men lay on their backs, with their hands clenched, their faces contorted in agony. Almost all of the more than 1,300 dead men had been disemboweled, turned on their backs, then slashed open with a spear from sternum to groin. Their intestines had spilled out onto the ground where the Zulus' bare feet had smashed them, spreading a stinking ooze across the plain. A few men had been scalped, and some had been mutilated, their genitals cut off and stuffed into their mouths, or their lower jaw chopped off and taken away as bearded trophies of victory. Although the British ultimately prevailed over the Zulus, taking few prisoners, less than a generation later they had to fight two brutal wars for control of South Africa against their fellow Europeans, the Boers, a mixture of Dutch and other settlers who had landed in South Africa before them. In the Second Boer War, 26,000 Boer women and children perished in British concentration camps. Such were the grim realities of imperialism in Africa, whether the imperialists were black or white. The centuries-old conquest of the agricultural Hutu by the cattle-herding Tutsis left an even larger and longer-lasting legacy of carnage among these two African peoples. After Rwanda and Burundi became independent nations in the second half of the 20th century, the former under the Hutus and the latter under the Tutsis, in each country the dominant group proceeded to massacre the other, setting off a cycle of slaughter, revenge, and mass refugee flight, whose end was still not in sight as the century neared its end.
I don't know, it's just really sad to think about all the human experiences for the past, thousands and thousands and thousands of years that have experienced warfare or raiding or slavery, and it just kept going on and on. That's what I talked about earlier when I said just to appreciate what you live through, and as bad as it can be, at least you don't have to go through that. The vast majority of the population on the planet right now don't have to deal with the rape of the grape of Nanking or Genghis Khan showing up to their city and having thousands and thousands of women throw themselves off the walls to avoid being assaulted by Genghis Khan's soldiers and generals. You don't have to worry about stuff like the pillaging, sacking, and destruction of Baghdad and all the art, culture, and knowledge that commenced under Genghis Khan, where he destroyed the Khwarezmian Shah, who honestly, if we gonna be honest about it, he started by talking trash to Genghis Khan to begin with. But still at the same time, just appreciate that we don't have to deal with that type of stuff. When we do have that type of behavior going on, it's a terrorist group and it's much smaller impact globally compared to where it used to be. Genghis Khan could go from China to Russia and Georgia within his whole lifetime. Nowadays, when you have stuff like ISIS or people like that, they usually stay within their, country of origin or surrounding countries of origin. Every now and then they can have little spies or terrorist agents and that stuff in the rest of other countries, but for the most part it's very contained because we have, the UN, we have alliances, we have military that's always in these places now that's trying to seek them out and stop them from getting to a point that can harm US citizens. That wasn't the case before. Like he said, with the whole Scottish and British warfare, if you lived on the frontier, during any country, during any time period, you was at the risk of being raided, enslaved, or killed. It's just the case. If you was a Byzantine citizen, a Roman citizen, regardless, it doesn't matter. If you have a border and it's on the border of an enemy, for example, the Byzantines with the Turks or the Byzantines with the Sassanids or the Romans with the Gauls, you're at the risk of people crossing that border and raiding you. And you're so close to the border, there's no chance of you getting a raid and have no army protecting your land. You just have to deal with it and move on. But luckily, you don't have to deal with that stuff for the most part. But I don't know. That's what I got out of this video. I always appreciate listening to Thomas Sowell and his work because he always dropping knowledge, and especially when it's history, I'm very invested. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. It's your boy Logos, and I'll see you next time. Peace.